Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting of June 27, 2017. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Barney Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Rico Medina.
Here.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Here.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Here.
Mayor Ruane.
Here. John, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a few announcements this evening. First of all, residents are reminded to use caution and adhere to all regulations when using safe and sane fireworks during the 4th of July holiday. All violations will be vigorously enforced, and I'd like the chiefs maybe to update us on preparations for the 4th.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I'll talk a little bit about some of the pre-4th of July campaign safety features that we've gone about, and then Ed will talk about some of the enforcement things. So, June 8th, we conducted a fireworks seminar, including distribution of safety literature, booth posters, and et cetera, to all the organizations that are selling fireworks. Staff also distributed about 300 warning posters to all city facilities, all public schools, private elementary and middle schools, both Cappuccino, Peninsula High Schools, and also Skyline College. Cable TV has been running 4th of July public service announcements all month, and beginning this weekend, all advertising on Channel 1 will be fireworks related. This month's City What message is fireworks related. Beginning tomorrow, all the booths will be inspected. Fire staff will also attend a great briefing by the PD operations led by Chief Barberini on the evening of 4th of July, and we'll also staff an extra engine on the 4th of July. Also, all the illegal fireworks that are collected by the San Bruno Police Department are turned in through other means, that will be turned in through other means. Will be collected, weighed, and transported to our magazine, reported to the state, and delivered for disposal. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Barberini.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council members. As the Fire Chief mentioned, officers of the San Bruno Police Department will be strictly enforcing the prohibited use of illegal, dangerous fireworks, as well as the improper use of safe and sane fireworks in the days prior to and during the 4th of July holiday. Police staffing levels have been increased to accommodate enforcement efforts, and officers will be deployed in marked vehicles, unmarked vehicles, on bicycles, and on foot during the holiday. Last year, the City Council made some changes to the municipal code that everybody should be aware of. Safe and sane fireworks can now be used from June 28th through July 3rd between the hours of 12 p.m. and 9 p.m., and from noon until 11 p.m. on the 4th. Safe and sane fireworks are only allowed on private property, and when used, should be a minimum of 10 feet from any structure or combustible material. Safe and sane fireworks are not allowed on any public street, park, school, parking lot, or any vacant area open to the public. The City Council has authorized the issuance of fines for violations of firework regulations. Individuals who violate the law regarding safe and sane fireworks use, or who are caught with dangerous or illegal fireworks, are subject to arrest and or a fine of up to $1,000. The police department would also like to remind residents that the municipal code section also applies to anyone that allows, causes, maintains, or permits a violation of the code to exist or continue by any act or any omission. So that's something to keep in mind. Over the next few days, officers will be contacting residents in areas where the use of illegal fireworks have been frequently used in past years to both review existing statutes and to alert residents of our dedicated enforcement efforts in those areas. Public notices, as mentioned by the Fire Chief, public notices have also been distributed via San Bruno Cable and all of our social media outlets. Police Department wishes everyone a happy and safe Independence Day and urges all residents and visitors to our city to abide by rules pertaining to fireworks while they're celebrating. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope it's all safe for all of our troops. Too. Very important.
I just had one thing to add. The difference between safe and sane and illegal fireworks is safe and sane fireworks are usually on the ground. They don't fly up in the air. Anything that flies or explodes is illegal. So just to be clear. So when you see those beautiful ones going up in the sky, those are illegal fireworks.
All right. Thanks, Chiefs. Appreciate it. Second announcement, due to a vehicle accident that caused damage to the San Bruno Senior Center, the city's Senior Center Nutrition Program will be relocated to St. Robert's Church Hennessy Hall on Oak Avenue until further notice. Senior programs will be held as usual in classrooms in the eastern part of the Senior Center building. And Carrie, would you give us an update, please?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm pleased to announce that all regular senior lunch services, programming, classes, and events have now resumed. The lunch service, along with dancing and daytime bingo, is offered at the St. Robert's Hennessy Hall. At the Senior Center, we are offering a variety of club meetings, classes, and Pedro. Because we needed additional space to accommodate all the activities that usually occur in this room and the room that we don't have access to, we are now offering tap and line dancing at the Recreation Center and yoga and Pilates at the Portola Performing Arts Center. We're asking anybody that would like the specific schedule, addresses, and so forth to log onto the city's website at www.sanbruno.ca.gov. As we look forward over the summer, shortly prior to the beginning of the school year and at the end of August, and once we conclude the delivery of the summer youth programs at the Recreation Center, we will be moving programming and the lunch service that's currently at St. Robert's and the services that are currently at the Portola Performing Arts Center to the Recreation Center. This will occur on Monday, August 21st. This will be the first date that we can actually use the Recreation Center because that'll be the first day where kids will be returning to school or preparing for the school year. There may be a very brief interruption in the delivery of lunch services for a day or two on August 17th and 18th to accommodate St. Robert's preparation of the school year and the conclusion of the summer youth programming at the Recreation Center. I mention this only to begin to give people an idea of that we will transition from St. Robert's to the Recreation Center as soon as St. Robert's needs Hennessy Hall for the school year. We will publish and use our phone tree to provide this information to seniors as that date gets closer, and we'll keep the council updated.
Carrie, I know a lot of people have asked me, it just happened literally a few days ago, but any idea length? Is it, we talking 4, 5, 6 months? Are we talking, you have any feeling for that at all?
So we have a meeting tomorrow, which includes the city manager, the city attorney, the insurance adjusters, and David Wiltering, the community development director, and Roy, the chief building official. We'll begin to start to get an idea of that, and I'm sure the city manager will report to the council.
Okay, very good, thank you. I do have one more announcement that wasn't on the agenda. If you all saw the food and home section of last Sunday's Chronicle, it highlights downtown San Bruno, calling it the home to the Bay Area's most diverse food scene. And so it's a wonderful article, and it highlights, I think, 8 or 9 of the restaurants, but we all know there's many more down there than 8 or 9, so it's an up-and-coming place. It is, if you're looking for diversity, and so it's a wonderful article and really highlights our downtown, so more to come. Presentations. We have a presentation this evening on San Mateo County's Home for All program, an initiative to address housing on a regional basis.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and the members of the Council. My name is Jessica Stanfield-Mullen. I'm with the Office of Sustainability, and I'm here tonight to talk about our Home for All San Mateo County initiative and the Closing the Jobs Housing Gap Task Force. And I had a presentation ready, if it could be loaded.
It's got a little device on it. It's got a high-tech device with screen. Steve, never mind. Yeah. Cut.
Great. Thank you. Before I begin to talk about the Home for All initiative, I wanted to provide some context for the housing crisis and the impacts that we're experiencing here in San Mateo County. Between 2010 and 2015, San Mateo County saw tremendous job growth. We added over 72,000 new jobs. However, we only added approximately 3,800 units of housing. So for every 1 unit of housing that we built, we add 19 new jobs. Additionally, one of the challenges that we experience in San Mateo County is that a lot of our land is protected either open space or preserved for agriculture. So we only have about 25 to 30% of our land that is developable. Additionally, of our housing stock, 2/3 of that is single-family homes. So we have to think very creatively about the available land that we have to develop, as well as thinking about creative solutions to utilize our existing housing stock that we have throughout the county. As everyone is aware, we've seen tremendous increases in prices for sale single-family homes in condo, as well as rents for 2-bedroom and 1-bedrooms throughout our county. As of December 2016, the median price for a single-family home was $1.3 million, and for a condo, it was $750,000. Also, we are experiencing that a lot of our workforce is commuting from outside the county. The 340,000 jobs that we have in San Mateo County, 2/3 of our workforce is coming from communities beyond San Mateo County. And while the teal, orange, and brown wedges of the pie represent the workforce that are coming from our neighboring counties of San Francisco, Alameda, and Santa Clara County, I'd like to call out the dark purple, where we have 77,000 of our workers coming from beyond those counties, so either coming from Marin, the Central Valley, or coming up the coast from Santa Cruz. What we've also heard from our employers, both large and small, is that housing is becoming a problem in regards to recruitment and retention. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group does an annual CEO business climate survey, and over the past 4 years, housing has been identified as the #1 business challenge. Additionally, the Bay Area Council did a recent poll of residents and found that 34% of poll respondents indicated that they would likely be leaving the Bay Area due to high housing prices. So from that, the Board of Supervisors convened a study session in March of 2015 to look at ways in which the county could address this problem. They looked at 29 different policies and programs that the county currently has either in place or would be enacting over the next couple of years, as well as the funding commitments that they have provided since 2012. The county has invested $64 million in funding commitments, with a majority of that funding going towards housing development. However, regardless of these policies and funding commitments, the Board of Supervisors felt that more could be done. So in September 2015, they convened the Closing the Jobs Housing Gap Task Force. It was co-chaired by Supervisors Horsley and Slocum, had 55 participants with representatives from each of the councils and councils of all 20 cities and towns. I want to thank the Vice Mayor. He came to every one of our meetings at 7:30 in the morning once a month. So we really appreciate his commitment and dedication to this issue. Additionally, on the task force, we had large and small employers and business groups, representatives from the educational communities, for-profit, nonprofit developers, community-based organizations that provide housing services, as well as labor organizations. The task force met from September 2015 through June of 2016, and they really focused on the challenges that either their communities or their organizations were facing, and looked at a wide range of tools, best practices, and solutions in 5 key areas, including options for low-density housing in residential neighborhoods, high-density housing options along the transit corridors and in the downtowns, looking at ways to advocate effectively for funding for affordable housing, looking at the continuum of housing needs, including homelessness, preservation, and displacement, and then identifying creative strategies for community engagement. And rather than producing a white paper, the task force really wanted to keep this momentum going and to keep the work going. So instead, they had 4 key areas which they felt that if we could continue this work, we could be able to close this gap. They developed an action plan, which I'll talk about in a moment. We launched our Home for All website, which serves as an online resource center for residents and community partners that want to learn more about the impacts of this housing crisis on our community and ways in which we can address this throughout each of our jurisdictions as well as throughout the county. Launching a public relations and education campaign, and then continuing to build on the partnerships and doing more robust community engagement. And from that, The task force and the county has launched our Home for All San Mateo County initiative this past fall to keep this work moving forward. So what the initiative aims to do is to establish a climate where in San Mateo County there is a diversity of housing that is produced and preserved so that we have a future where everyone in San Mateo County has an affordable home, so that the county will be culturally, generationally, and economically diverse community with housing for all. And how we have structured this initiative is that we have a very diverse steering council, as well as 4 key work groups to sort of continue working on those major challenges that are associated with housing in San Mateo County. So the first group is our outreach and education work group, which is looking to develop a robust community engagement and education plan to engage more voices in the conversation on housing. The second is funding, looking at ways in which we can increase state, local, and private funding for affordable housing preservation and development. The third area is legislation and policy, trying to identify ways in which we can work with our federal and state legislators to enact tools and funding to help our local jurisdictions, as well as looking at the policies that each of our jurisdictions have enacted to make sure that they're housing friendly, as well as flexible to new and creative housing solutions. And then lastly, looking at the issue of mobility. We know that that's one of our major challenges, trying to identify ways in which we can be more creative about some of our transportation and transit options that we have enacted. So the Home for All initiative is working to move forward the action plan that was developed by the Jobs, Housing Gap Task Force. This action plan has 4 key areas. The first of which is developing partnerships and community support. We're asking each of the jurisdictions to adopt a Home for All resolution, which I'll explain a little bit later in the presentation. If San Bruno was interested in doing that, you would be the 15th jurisdiction to do so we hope that you would be interested in supporting the initiative, as well as continuing to do stakeholder convenings and outreach to our businesses throughout the community. Second is funding, identifying additional and new funding sources for affordable housing, looking at ways in which we can make HART more robust and dynamic. Additionally, the conversations that occurred at the task force inspired the Board of Supervisors to consider a ballot measure last fall to identify ways in which we could create local revenue source for housing, and that prompted the passage of Measure K this past November. We are also currently looking at doing a pilot project around a RENA shared housing credit legislation to see if jurisdictions are interested in pooling funds and sort of seeing in ways in which we can get more housing built. And then we also established an affordable housing rental preservation fund last June. The third area is supporting all types of housing development. Again, as I mentioned, we have our Home for All website, which serves as an online community resource center. We will be launching this fall a second unit center for residents who are interested in maybe building a second unit, want to learn more about the process, what these things look like, who in their jurisdictions they could contact. It would sort of serve as a one-stop shop for interested residents. And then this summer, we are launching a facilitated community meetings pilot project. We're asking cities who are interested to step forward, try out new community engagement strategies and techniques so that we can have as many voices at the table in our communities talking about housing and those values that we hold dear. And then the fourth area is securing land and strengthening community infrastructure. I'm doing an analysis of available public land to see how much would be available to develop. I'm looking at regional options to enhance transit, and then lastly, making sure our developments are water efficient. So some of the work that we have done to date, again, building on those partnerships with our city councils. The faith community is extremely engaged on this issue, working with foundations, environmental groups, school districts who have talked about the need for housing for their staff and teachers, and as well as engaging our business community into ways in which we can address this through a public-private partnership. We've also developed a number of educational materials. We have our Home for All website, which is homeforallsmc.com. We have brochures and talking points available for residents and community partners as well. So as I mentioned, a number of cities have adopted our Home for All resolution. including the county and CCAG, and we have 14 other jurisdictions. We hope that San Bruno will consider adopting a resolution in the future, and then we are also doing a similar presentation to Brisbane next month. And what the resolution asks is that the city will commit to continue working with other jurisdictions in the county to address our housing crisis on a regional basis, including through ongoing support of the Home for All San Mateo County Initiative. And I want to thank Vice Mayor Ibarra. He serves on our outreach and education work group through the Home for All Initiative and has been a real supporter. This ends my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Jessica at this time? Ken?
Not going to make it too long because I have a 7:30 meeting tomorrow morning. I want to thank Jessica for coming out and giving basically 3 years, 2.5 years of process in about a few minutes. It's no secret we have issues with housing. People want to live here, and the demand is high, and the prices are even higher. And that, along with transportation issues, is what attracted me to be, I guess, my city's unofficial representative for this. And so, when the housing gap task force came along, I was just curious, and so was surprised to see a lot of my colleagues throughout the county also curious. And I want to thank the county for really instigating this and putting their staff on the line and getting all of this information and making it, palatable and easy for us to understand. And I think the best part of it is that there's 21 jurisdictions, or eventually 21 jurisdictions, that are going to work together on this regional problem that's probably never going to be solved in our lifetime, but we got to get started sometime. And it just spurred from, the rental and eviction issues over in San Mateo and Burlingame and all those things and everything, and saying, we got to do something. So I think I'm proud to say that San Bruno is well positioned to do this, because we have a transit corridors plan. We understand the issues of higher density. I'm proud that we passed our linkage fees, and so that through the prosperous times we will get money to use towards housing. So I'm hoping we are the 15th. We're not the 15th because there was some controversy or anything. We're just 15 because Jessica's very busy. And this is a big issue throughout the county, and it's something that I'm very committed to, and I hope my colleagues in this community is also. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I know that the staff is preparing the resolution for our next meeting, and so we look forward to getting on board for Home for All. So
Thank you so
very
much.
much.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
See you tomorrow.
Great. Item number 5, review of the agenda. Anything with the agenda? Okay. Approval of the minutes of the special council meetings of May 23rd, June 12th, 13th, 14th, and 19th, and regular meeting of June 13th, 2017. Any errors, corrections, or omissions? Marty?
I just wanted to clarify on page 3 of 6, when we voted to the vote for approving the increasing the fees, the vote was included the resolution by Councilwoman O'Connell, and it was to omit the water connection fee, the backfill fee, hydrant meter change, and it was my understanding we're also going to include the actual increases on the building permits. And the minutes don't reflect that. And earlier on, it was mentioned that that was going to be brought back, so I'm a little confused on how that worked out. I'm sure, I'm just...
Oh, that was a discussion, and I was asked if that would be part of my motion, and I said no.
Through the chair, Councilmember O'Connell is correct. She made that, and I wanted to have that pulled as well into the other additional items. And after her discussion, the answer was no. That's when my no vote occurred, but my expectation was that staff was still going to bring it back, but it wasn't part of that resolution, if that's how I recall it.
That's how I recall it.
Clarified?
Clarified, and that's fine.
Okay.
We'll bring it up in comments then.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, may I ask for clarification about specifically what it is that the council expects to be brought back? The minutes say, and staff is preparing to bring back the water connection fee, the backflow fee, and the hydrant meter charge initiatives. Those are all three on our radar screen and will be back to the city council. I believe we're have that scheduled for July.
Right.
Oh,
That-
is there something in addition to that?
No,
Okay,
no.
got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other changes, errors, corrections,
Through
omissions?
through the chair,
Ken?
thank you for bringing that up. No, I agree, that's what was decided, and that's how the proceeding went. I just want to clarify, when it says the vice mayor said he, on page 2 of 6, vice mayor said he believed charging for development is totally wrong. I think that's a paraphrasing of what I said. What I meant to say is that charging for valuation of development is, in my opinion, wrong. And then he felt we were gauging the customer. I believe I said I felt we were gouging the customer. So,
Okay. Vicki, you have those?
thank you.
Okay. Any other errors, corrections, omissions? Okay, the minutes will stand as submitted with the corrections as noted. Okay. Consent calendar, all items are considered routine or implemented in earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested. Anything on consent?
Move to accept?
Second?
Motion is second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Through the chair, very quickly on item A, accounts payable, warrant register, 2 invoices for professional law that, so noted that I'm not approving.
All right, item number 8, we do have a public hearing this evening. We're going to hold a public hearing, and there's 2 items. Adopt a resolution approving the 2017-18 operating and 27-22 capital improvement program budget, and adopt a resolution approving the city appropriations to the GAN limit for 2017-2018. Mr. O'Leary.
Actually, I'm going to say a few words, and then
City
I will
manager.
turn to the interim finance director. Before you tonight is the proposed operating and capital budgets for your consideration to approve. And I wanted to give you an outline of the topics that will be discussed tonight, and one topic that staff will be bringing back. As you will recall, the City Council conducted 2 fairly lengthy budget study sessions on June 12th and June 14th. The purpose of those study sessions was for detailed review and presentations and discussions by the City Council on the variety of topics and proposed expenditures that are outlined in the budget documents. The City Council provided some direction, and in particular, the City Council discussed what we're calling the proposed major enhancement program, which would establish task forces with additional staff to address neighborhood and downtown issues. That proposal and the City Council's direction, guidance, comments from the study sessions is not before you tonight. Staff is requesting some additional time to refine those proposals, to provide some alternatives, and to integrate the comments from the City Council discussion in order to refine those proposals for further City Council review. What is in front of you tonight, however, is the general fund, the enterprise fund, and all other operating fund operating budgets. As the finance director will outline in a moment, those funds are very significant dollar amounts and cover all of the city's operating requirements across all of its programs, services, and activities. Also before you tonight is the 5-year capital improvement plan and a 1-year capital improvement budget with allocations proposed to move a broad variety of capital improvement projects forward during the coming year. Lastly, in terms of what's incorporated in the budget, as we have done in most of the last many years, or all of the last many years, departments have identified certain limited program and service enhancements that are recommended for the City Council's consideration to expand, improve, or otherwise change the delivery of existing programs and services to be able to provide more, to do it in a more efficient or a different way. Those departmental service enhancements are listed separately for your consideration, both in the budget document as well as an attachment to the staff report tonight. And we look forward to your consideration of that as well. Lastly, for your discussion and consideration tonight is a relatively routine item, and that is the city's GAN limit, a feature of state law that establishes a maximum amount of budgeted expenditure that the city is authorized to engage. And again, this year, like all of the past previous years since the law went into effect in the state of California, this city is not at risk of meeting or exceeding its GAN limit. The finance director will provide you some additional explanation about that item. So in front of you tonight, you have two resolutions, one on the GAN limit and one that is fully incorporates the various budgets that I mentioned and that the finance director will detail in his further discussion. We've also included in the agenda packet, as was requested a few years ago by the City Council, an alternative resolution should the City Council determine that it is not prepared to adopt the budget. This being the last meeting prior to the end of the fiscal year which ends on June 30th. In order to continue operations and expenditures into the new fiscal year beginning July 1st, the city would either need to adopt a budget or would need to alternatively adopt a continuing appropriations resolution. And again, so we've included, there are actually 3 resolutions in your agenda packet, only 2 of which you need to adopt tonight. Just a couple of broad-based comments to frame the discussion that the finance director will provide in more detail. The budgets were developed with a series of continuing objectives and big picture priorities that frame the city's work program, and in support of that work program, the revenue and expenditures that are allocated to the delivery of services, programs, and activities to meet those objectives. The slide in front of you on the screen identifies those big picture objectives, and I think they're worth mentioning for the purpose of public information because they are extremely important to the everyday activities that the city undertakes. Those objectives include the full implementation of the city's transit corridor plan. That work is in progress and will continue for the next several years as we begin to see the vision of the future of San Bruno in its physical form build out in accordance with that plan. Growing city revenues to meet the needs of a growing and more sophisticated community whose needs have evolved and have become broader. In order to meet those needs, promoting wherever and however we can the use of service delivery efficiencies, most particularly including technology and technological advancement, strengthening the community connections and the engagement of citizens, providing opportunities for public discussion, for public education, and all manner of public engagement. Improving and securing the aesthetics and the safety of the community is assuming a very high priority in the city's daily work activity with code enforcement and with our law enforcement and our fire safety. Rehabilitation, replacement of community facilities and infrastructure. We have the wonderful opportunity to plan for the replacement of our recreation center and our swimming pool, but that is only one of the many different items and issues that are in front of us on a nearly everyday basis to assure that this community's building and operational infrastructure maintains its ability to serve the community long into the future. And then just more generically, keeping our eye on the ball at what's coming, not just what's immediately here, so that we can do as we have done for the last many years to make sure that the San Bruno of now is prepared and is looking forward to the San Bruno of the future, so that we can continue to evolve, to grow, and to make San Bruno the best it can be forever. With that, I'm going to ask the interim finance director to give you a review. This will be deliberately at a fairly high level and focusing on the financial aspects of the budget. Again, we spent 2 fairly lengthy study sessions a couple of weeks ago, going into a great deal more detail about the budgets, and you have the thick volume of the materials available to you in hard copy. It is also available on the city's website for any interested citizen. I would just mention as well, I've indicated the more detailed discussion that occurred at the City Council budget study sessions. Those study sessions were videotaped. That the opportunity to view and hear that discussion is available to any citizen, either by way of television on the city's Channel 1 at scheduled times, or by using the direct connection via the city's website to view those programs online. So with that, I'll ask Mr. O'Leary to give us an overview of the financial aspects of the budgets.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, your resolution in part calls for operating revenues, an appropriation of about $94 million plus transfers in, and operating expenditures of $81 million and transfers out of about $7 million. In summary, the slide behind me is showing that of those totals, around $43 million represents the general fund. You can see the various amounts for the 4 enterprise funds. In total, the internal service funds are around $5 million, and all remaining special revenue funds are in the range of $3 million. In addition to that, the total that I described in the resolution includes capital improvement, and there's a separate slide that summarizes that I will show in a moment. Wanted to just focus on the general fund for a second, and the two aspects of that we discussed in some detail at the study sessions. The difference between revenues and expenditures in 17-18, proposed expenditures exceed proposed sources or revenues by about $350,000, and the recommended 17-18 budget utilizes fund balance from 16-17 of an offsetting amount, $350,000, to balance the budget. I would point out also at the bottom of the middle column, the approximately $3 million is the ending fund balance that we're projecting at the end of the current year. And the 350 and balancing the budget comes out of that 2.9, leaving about 2.6 that is available for service enhancements if the council desires to utilize those funds. Just brief comment on a couple of the enterprise accounts. You see that for the water fund, increased rates will bring in a total revenue of about $14.3 million in the right-hand column. This is then leading to expenditures, operating expenditures of about $9 million, a little over $9 million, which represents 65% of the operating revenue. That the balance beyond the 65%, a balance of about $5 million is available for current capital projects. For the wastewater fund, similarly, the increased rates will bring in about $16,600,000 with an operating expenditure of only 54% of that revenue, leaving about half of the revenue generated in 17-18 available for current capital projects. For the cable fund, just wanted to point out that the proposed cable fiber to the home project, which will serve additional multiple dwelling units, is about $1.4 million, and that capital requirement is what leads to increasing the negative fund balance in the cable fund from what is estimated at $9.3 million to about $10.7 million at the end of 17-18. I mentioned the resolution amounts a minute ago and indicated that there is additional included in those appropriations or additional CIP funding. You see the current year 17-18 funding request, which is in the second column from the left, of $29,300,000, and that would be the new appropriation that the council would be appropriating if they elect to proceed with all of the proposed projects. There's, you see a large amount, about $46 million in carryover appropriations in the various capital funds that bring the total available projects for 17-18 to about $76 million. Wanted to just point out, again, as we did in the study session, in particular, one of the reserve funds that is the general fund capital reserve. You see going back to the beginning of 16-17, which would be the end of 15-16, there was about an $8 million fund balance in this general fund capital reserve. You see there are projects both for carryover and proposed in 17-18 of $8 million roughly, that little less than $8 million that is going to bring, if all of those funds are in fact expended, the ending fund balance for this reserve would be about $1.1 million at the end of 17-18. And I just wanted to point out that there is no immediate capacity to restore the general fund capital reserve to any higher level. So this reduction with approved projects again, would result in this balance of about $1.1 million. The balance of the discussion then is on the enhancements, and I don't know if you want to open up.
So actually, just going back to what I said earlier, we've included slides regarding the enhancements in anticipation of any conversation the City Council may want to have on those specifics. But really, the time tonight is for your purposes, to discuss any additional items, including the enhancements that the City Council may wish to consider further before taking any action. And we've agendized this discussion tonight to include a public hearing, so we would recommend that you take the opportunity to ask any immediate questions and then open the public hearing for members of the public to be heard, and then to proceed with any further discussion the City Council may wish to undertake.
Okay. Any questions of staff at this time before we open the public hearing? No? Okay, at this time we'll open the public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to address the council on the budget items? If I close the public, you want to speak? All right, sure.
Good evening. Steve Seymour from Mastic Avenue. The enhancements that you were talking about, is that what brings the general fund balance at the end of 17-18 down to 1.167?
The 1.167 is in a reserve fund, so that's not impacting the general fund, and the enhancements do not change that number or impact that number. That is it's a reserve for capital projects only, and it is for capital projects that have no dedicated funding through an enterprise account or whatever. It's a general fund supported capital project.
Okay, then, just for my understanding then, is what you're saying that the target, I was in one of the earlier meetings, and the target general fund balance that you wanted for the reserve fund was $8 million. So does the budget that's being proposed draw from that $8 million so that at the end of 2017-18 you only have $1.67 million in the reserve fund?
With the previously approved and the recommended projects of a capital nature, that is correct. This particular reserve, the balance would be the 1.167 at the end of the 17-18 fiscal year.
The reserve is never at 8 million. Reserve is it's not at 8 million though, is it?
That's
Is it
correct.
4.3?
It's only at 4.3.
Correct. And I would just, I would add for the City Council's information that reserve is deliberately intended as the funding source, as the Director mentioned, for capital facility projects in particular that do not have another dedicated source of funding. So on an annual basis, those amounts are used for capital projects. This year is no different than any other year, except that the balance projected at year end will be a bit lower than in some other previous years.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else from the public like to address the council? If we close the public hearing, you're precluded from discussing this with us. Any action?
Move to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion second to close the public hearing. Anything on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Council? Comments, questions? Action? Marty, anything?
Thank you. I'm a little concerned about going from 9 million down to 1.1 million and here in the reserve fund, and historically, we've maintained approximately how much?
Generally, just by memory,
Just-
in the last few years, we've been between 4 and
Right.
5 million or so.
And that money went this year to which projects? A number of different projects, or
Many different projects.
just as it worked out? So it was just another location where money was pooled to be able to fund the various projects that we're putting in place now.
So it went to the capital improvement program, and I believe there's a table in the financial summary section of the capital improvement program that identifies how much came out of
So that's fine. I guess what I'm looking at, when you carry over 46 million from the CIP that wasn't spent, that was approved the previous year, and then needing to draw down the reserve fund, I mean, are we going to be able to do all this work if it didn't happen last year?
the majority of the work in the capital improvement program is in the utility enterprises, water and wastewater. The amounts that came out of the general fund capital reserve are primarily, they are funding stormwater projects for which there is no dedicated revenue available, and that it carries a fairly significant price tag, along with public facility related projects that have no other dedicated funding source. So the tables in the budget identify how much came from where, and while I believe you're articulating a concern about the scope of the program and whether all of the many projects proposed can actually get done, a more precise analysis would need to be made in order to determine since most of those projects are utility projects, it's not the same thing as saying, well, if you took out the capital reserve monies, that would lighten the load, because the projects that are being funded by the capital reserve would just not be able to be delivered at all, irrespective of whether there was capacity to deliver them or not. And many of them are essential projects for the city's reliability.
For the 3 million proposed in this budget, roughly where is that going?
So the 3 million went into this. So the finance director tells me that of that balance in the general fund capital reserve, 2 million was transferred in for pavement management projects, and is being transferred out from that fund via this budget for actual delivery of the pavement program. And you'll recall that's per city council previous direction.
Okay. So, do we want to go through the supplemental thing here, or one at a time, or do we want to, which way do we want to go with our comments? Just open for everything?
What's easier for you, Jim? And
I
Connie?
think it might be best to answer any questions regarding the base budget.
Right.
And then
Okay.
go back to the
Okay.
enhancements.
That's fine. I would like to ask to increase the budget, believe it or not, for the curb ramps that we currently have budgeted. I believe we have, is that 75,000 currently added on? I'm sorry, I just had it. I'm sorry, so there's a carryover of 288,000. This is on page 409. There's no money added for this year, and then it drops down to 20,000 in 2018, 2019, 20, and nothing in 2021. Yes. I think that we need to be a little more aggressive on it. It just continually gets more expensive to construct things, and 50,000 more would probably be able to do 2 more intersections. That's what I would like to see in that, and if I need to, I can, I guess, amend the proposal budget. But I wanted to share that with the council so we can possibly talk about it.
So for the current year, for 17-18, the amount programmed for that purpose is $288,000. That's the number you want to increase?
Well, the new request, the carryover is 288. Is that right? I'm reading that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I would want to put more in there, another 50,000.
For 17-18?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to spruce up some of our existing parks on the east side of town. I know we're getting a beautiful brand new park at Florida. We're getting a brand new park over in Crestmore, but I would like to add some benches over in 7th Avenue, Walnut Park. There's very little places to kind of hang out. I went there in the last month, and it's a beautiful little park, just that there's really not too many places to kind of hang out. Your kids are fine jumping around and playing a little bit there, but I think we could put some tables. I didn't see any barbecue pits there. I don't wonder, curious why we wouldn't have any there. And those are my comments for now, without the enhancements.
Rico, anything?
Just on the general, couple things. Just as a thought to the, I'm sorry.
Jim?
Sorry, just,
Through the chair, go ahead, Jim.
I guess I was just suggesting or would ask the council's pleasure if there is a specific dollar amount, as the council member mentioned on the pedestrian ramp project. I mean, that is clearly a specific action that the council would be clear on and would be able to vote one way or another. On the second item you brought up, I'm not sure if, it sounded to me as if there may be further consideration that staff might come back with a budget amendment down the road to specifically address what you're asking for, as opposed to not, unless you have something specific that you want the council to consider.
Thank you. I think it would be great for staff to come back, and when we address the second phase of supplemental, for when we're talking about the task force, and maybe some of the other council members have some requests to be put in at that time. But I don't want to hold it up, but I would like staff to kind of look.
At least it would, we could have something specific
Right.
that the council could consider either then. I mean, I think we're talking about coming back for the major enhancements on the 27th of
That would be
July.
good.
Or the 25th. I'm not sure that we might be ready, but in the first quarter,
Sure.
we could come back
Right.
and precise some of the other items the
If
council
I
is
can get
now
an answer
voting.
on, is barbecuing allowed on the east side?
we could look into that and report back to you about that. Barbecuing is not allowed in all city parks, but we will look into that and let you know.
Through the chair, I just have a quick question, just so everybody's clear about it. If your request is to enhance the sidewalk rehabilitation budget by $50,000, that $50,000 would be coming from this reserve fund, correct? I mean, because that's one of those unfunded, or not dedicated revenue.
It's not coming from water fund.
No.
It's not coming from cable.
So generally, the answer to that question is, or comment is yes. We would have to look at the available balance. It is an eligible cost for Measure A or gas tax funds, but we would have to look at the available balances and make a determination about whether they're sufficient to transfer an additional $50,000.
Okay, so I just want everyone in the public to understand that when we make these requests, we have to, that's where the money comes from. I mean, either it comes from here or it comes from the designated revenue stream. It's not that we can just throw out numbers and the money magically appears. So just so you all are aware of that.
Through the chair, and while we're on this issue, yeah, street lights and street resurfacing rehabilitation comes from these also, and also the Measure A funds. But I would also I appreciate my colleague bringing that up as far as the handicap ramp improvements. I made eye contact with our Public Works Director. As a member of the subcommittee, I think we can come back with a budget amendment. I'd like the subcommittee to do just like what we did with the street resurfacing and also with the street lights, to review and assess what the community is as far as the shortage of these handicap ramps and where we should go. Because I don't know what $20,000 is going to do, in the near future, in the future budget. So, and maybe we can only do $288,000 worth of work this coming year, but we can, maybe outline a program over the next few years, that will hopefully catch up on that. So, I'm with you on that.
Okay. Rico. Oh, one more thing? Go ahead.
One more. It involves our trees, our city trees, and I'm looking at page 394, and we do have carryover of 96,000, and we're requesting 75,000. And without reading the blurb here about what's been going on there, it seems that we have the money to do it, just that we haven't completed the work. And I'm bringing this up because as I drive around our city, I'm looking at those branches that are hanging over the street, and I witnessed a tree that I didn't see it fall down in Commodore Park, but it was a big tree, and it fell down, and part of the limb landed on a bench. And on these windy San Bruno afternoons, and it was that morning that it actually happened. And I think that we should really look at focusing on spending this money and getting those trees trimmed, because as it says here, as of May, 66 of the 146 for tree removal have been completed. And if we need more money to do that, then we should do it, because it's already been identified in a project to be removed. And I wanted to point that out, that if we need more money there, I think it's the time to do it, because we can't have, God forbid, something tragically happening when it's already on the books that they should be cut, pruned, and taken care of.
So the funding programmed in this project does just that. It completes the work that was identified in the 2010 tree inventory, and provides funding for the update of that inventory. So once we have that update, we will be able to more precisely identify what additional work going forward needs also to be done and what the cost of that will be.
Just to clarify, so of the study done in 2010, that money that we currently have in our budget with the $75,000 would take care of the trees identified in 2010, but not anything new since then. And I'm sure there's plenty of trees that are in 7 years, trees have a lifespan too, but that's how I'm reading the report.
So the funding that is available in this project, including the carry forward and the new proposed appropriation, will complete the work identified in the 2010 Arborist report. As you well understand, trees are living, growing, evolving features of our community. The updated report will doubtless identify a new program of work that then will need to be addressed in subsequent years.
Right, but in 2018, 19, 20, 21, there's no money budgeted in this 5-year plan.
Based on the uncertainty of what the amounts needed to address the new updated report findings. So that will be done, the report will be updated this year, and the CIP budget will be accordingly updated in subsequent years.
Okay.
Rico.
A couple things on the general budget, and just to go on the Vice Mayor's comment regarding the curb ramps, I'm in favor of that. In regards to parks on the east side, something I can have some experience with is I think that is something that maybe should go back to our Parks and Rec Commission, who's dealt with that. I know there are some parks that did have barbecue pits, picnic benches, and those were taken out by the residents. On some parks, asking because it became an area of congregation. It became an area at night, having fires to keep warm. It provided an atmosphere that was not the best and conducive for some of the neighborhoods and community, and they felt unsafe. So I think what might be of value is go back to the Park and Rec Commission. It's just like the drinking in the park. It used to be allowed everywhere and anywhere. Then it became only to certain parks, and then it became only to picnic sites at certain parks. So there's been an evolution of that because of everybody trying to have a good piece of the pie and wanting to have a good, safe neighborhood to go to. So that might just be a suggestion. I know benches as well. We've had a program that people can get a bench in honor of a loved one and have provided that. So many that in City Park, that's not even allowed in City Park anymore because we ran out of space, and now they've gone to other places, and that has been a nice way to memorialize somebody that they love and come by and sit and reminisce, shall we say, in one way or another. In regards to the general budget, I had asked staff, and I do appreciate that on the contract services, the operational supplies, and the overtime, I'd asked and received thank you from staff for each division in each department, what costs were for budgeted 16-17, what actual costs were as of year to date, and what is going forward and being asked. I was pleased to see in the contract services and the operational supplies that it seemed that it had held steady and that it even came under in many areas. I'm not going to go department and division because we'll be here forever. But on the overtime aspect, that is one that I would like to hear from maybe the city manager, is how we're maintaining that. There were some departments that were quite over in the allocation for overtime, and there were some departments that were right on target. And I understand there's costs and there's unforeseen. It could be about backfilling positions in public safety. But at the same time, I want to hear some type of what do we do, how do we analyze this, and how do we go going forward trying to make it more effective or efficient so we can try to balance those funds and not have an over expenditure.
So I've asked staff to prepare summaries both of the reason for the overtime in terms of the historical expenditure in the prior year, as well as the look forward to how the budget was built and why the overtime, what is the purpose for the overtime. so that we can analyze that and present that in a comprehensive manner to the City Council. We're not prepared to do that tonight, but we can certainly bring that back to the City Council for all divisions and departments with significant overtime budgets, and there are a few.
Thank you. I didn't expect a full answer. I was just looking for some general,
Sure.
but as one member up here, I'd like to see that come back when we have a more detailed analysis of that and to make sure that we're addressing those on an annual basis.
Anything else on the agenda right now? Irene?
I apologize, I should have brought this up during one of our study sessions, but it occurred to me, we had talked about financial director, or finance development person over the years, and we did not bring it up this year, and I spoke to the city manager earlier about that, and she was going to make some comments.
So we did not include an economic development coordinator or economic development manager in this budget as we have in in previous years. The thinking behind that was that we had programmed some funds in last year for the downtown parking management plan, and in the current year for streetscape plan, with the idea that continuing development activity and build out of the transit corridor plan was consuming our immediate available time and planning efforts. And with those two initiatives, that we were setting the stage and doing economic development enhancement type of activities. We can certainly, what I would suggest at this point is, if that's an interest of the City Council, is that we could bring back the staffing proposal at a subsequent meeting as early as the next meeting for more thoughtful consideration by the City Council with costing and the work activities.
Yes.
Anything else?
Well, are we looking at the proposed supplemental enhancements?
Not right now.
Not right now. Okay, as soon as that was it.
Okay, anything, Ken?
So we're not going to talk about the enhancements yet. What are we doing as far as the proposed major program enhancements? I know there was. Is that next month? That's not part of this approval tonight?
Yes, staff is requesting additional time to incorporate the feedback and the discussion that the City Council undertook at the study sessions, to factor that in to bring you back some options and proposals to address those thoughts that were shared at the study sessions.
Okay, then I have nothing.
Okay. Enhancements, Marty?
Thank you. Starting at the top, I'm concerned about having a full-time public information communication officer with an ongoing cost of $150,000. In fact, I'm concerned of adding staff in general. I think we have to be very, very careful of where we are and what is absolutely necessarily critical as we're going forward. There are pensions that we need to be concerned with, and I am worried about ramping up things so quickly and then coming down when the bubble eventually does pop of having to lay people off. So I'm not sure about, I'm actually not in favor currently of a full-time communication officer. I would like to see, instead of buying vehicles, to lease vehicles. There are amazing lease rates right now. I brought that up last year. I haven't seen any data to show me why we should be buying vehicles instead of leasing them. Leasing is great because as soon as you drive the car off the lot, you lose $5,000 to $10,000. And I from what I recall from the vehicles that we currently have, they have very low miles on them, and so there would be no problem of exceeding that 10,000 mile per year catch that they have in leasing vehicles. I'm concerned about the parks, hiring the 2 parks workers and understanding that's absolutely critical. At some point, yes, when we get the new parks online, but those parks won't be online until hopefully the end of the year, towards the end of the year. So those are my comments.
Okay.
Through the chair,
Irene?
can we ask for clarification as we go through this?
I'm sorry?
Well, Councilman Marty Medina said he wasn't in favor of hiring full-time people, but then he only mentioned the communication officer and the park people. But is he also saying we shouldn't do the community service, 2 community service officers as well, or are you just, and the custodian? Or are you just saying of the people we're asking, that is being asked to hire, only those 2 people you don't want?
I'm okay with the ones I didn't mention. I'm okay with. I mean, I was convinced from the police chief why those 2 positions needed to be full-time, handling the digital evidence, and I think that's the future. We need to have those CSOs, and they need to be on full-time, so I'm all right with those.
So your concern is just those 2 positions?
So, sorry, the public information officer.
And the parks?
The parks, and just hearing that we really need a full-time custodian, if that's critical at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments from staff regarding the necessity
Yeah,
for?
Mr. Mayor, if we might, I was thinking that it might be more efficient to get all of the questions or need for feedback,
Okay.
if you don't mind, and then
That's
we
fine.
can organize what staff needs to respond, if you're okay with that.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Rico, on enhancements?
I'd like to have more clarification on the custodian, what our current staffing is. As far as, how many folks do we have on duty, and for what facilities? I understand in the past there used to be maybe 2 at this facility, for example. I'm sorry, in my day there was 1.5. Here at the senior center, I know there's 1. But how many do we have at the rec? How many do we have at the library, the police? Does the gentleman from the city hall also service the library? So yes, I'd like to know that. Also on the public information's communication officer, I'm not knowing if that is necessary, or if it's at a full-time capacity at this time. On the maintenance workers, since that was brought up, I know that I would be the first to say that the question was last time a parks facilities manager, and my thought was we need people in the field to do the medians, to keep the parks up, and then we're going to be bringing others online. And I know that staff had indicated that was going to come back with those folks in the field to do the work that needs to be done. So yes, I don't mind having it validated, but I do know in my day we had 2 people that used to line the fields, and now we have volunteers line their fields, and we charge them for that privilege. I know that we used to have many other aspects of the park since I worked in Parks and Recreation, so I want to know that if we're bringing folks on, what is their end result of what they're going to do, where are we going to see the value, and how is the community going to notice a difference. As far as other items on there, if I'm not mistaken, the community services officers, somebody can address that, I don't know if it was adding a lot of additional to address community needs, which will come up later, as the Vice Mayor said, or when he was asking the question, but maybe that can be just reinforced to me. The digital evidence officer, I understood. I believe at this point, as far as the others, I was fine.
Okay. Irene?
Well, frankly, I have a question about, now where'd it go? The replacement for council tables and chairs up here, 37,000. Was that? Oh, nice, very nice tables and chairs. Is that, that's the line item here, and I'd like to find out what that actually means.
Is there anything else?
I have some questions about the Public Information Communications Officer. I think we need somebody to do certain things. I think maybe part of the hesitancy on some of our, to prove that kind of thing, is we might need to have that fleshed out, and the duties of what that person would actually be doing, like a job description maybe, and maybe that would help us understand what that person would be doing, and maybe that person could be doing some economic development efforts as well. So those are my two major questions.
Okay, Ken?
Well, let's just go right into that public information officer. I think it's well needed. However, I think we have some existing programs and resources that someone has to operate, and that's our website, that's our social media sites. Those are the things that need to be maintained almost at least on a daily basis, if not multi-daily basis, or else they're not dependable. So yes, we need to address that. I don't know if it's hiring one person that that does it, or whether it's hiring a service or something. Yes, on the police, I don't have any issues as far as the police department enhancements, although I would like, from the study sessions and from these other enhancements that we'll be discussing next month, I'd like some reassurances that the CSOs, along with Public Works staff, are going to be doing the tasks that, assigned to the tasks that we have these new programs set up for. Building and planning, I look at those, and yes, as much as they're enhancements and additional costs, I'm hoping that they're set up for cost recovery from those developments and from those big projects that are coming down the pike. Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what our options are as far as vehicle purchasing and what's out there. And yeah, we do need new tables and chairs. But also, I mean, and to be serious, I am, from these study sessions and from our Public Works Department, stormwater and what we've got coming out is whether we know we have the reserves for it or whether we know that we have some funding available. To me, with the city of this size and with the requirements we're faced with in the immediate future, $250,000 is nothing. So I think that's just a bigger discussion that is that's just around the corner. Is that we're going to see that number considerably increased.
I don't have any major objections. I do think the Public Information Officer, what we've been going through the last year or year and a half with the enhanced information that people are requesting, I think it's a necessary move, especially with social media the way it is now. You have to get the word out, and you need somebody dedicated to do that. It can't be haphazard. On the building and planning, we have a lot of stuff coming up, So anything we can enhance that particular division with, I'm in favor of. Let me see, tables and chairs, whatever. Just make sure you don't get your hands caught on staples or something. You have to be careful. Yeah, it's a card table is what it is, right? Dual purpose. As far as the parks personnel, we have new parks coming up. I think we need to enhance that. It's very, very important that we get that done. And I think was explained in the process when we heard of the study sessions why that's an important thing. So to staff, Connie, you can go down the list.
So I'm going to go backwards. Step up here in just a minute. So I'm going to start with stormwater, and then we'll ask the Community Services Director to address a few items. Regarding stormwater, I just want to point out that the $250,000 is a new initiative for spot repairs, similar to what we do in the water and the wastewater enterprises to deal with things that occur in real time and to have a ready funding source. Council is aware that over the past, certainly this past winter, we had 3 separate, fairly serious, one very serious incidences of stormwater system failures that have required special repairs and for which there was no funding dedicated or available. $250,000 is only part of what we're spending on the various stormwater requirements. It's intended to help us pull a little bit ahead, but the council member's vice mayor, is 100% correct that this is literally a drop in the bucket in terms of what the overall need is and how regulations are going to evolve the requirements for operation and maintenance of a stormwater collection system. So thank you for pointing that out. A couple of council members have mentioned vehicle purchasing, and in particular the opportunity to look at a leasing program. We will undertake a more comprehensive review. We did do that a couple of years ago, and I'd like to refresh my memory about why staff's conclusion was, and it could have been in that particular market environment. It turned out not to be something that we felt was important to recommend to the council, but clearly, given the costs of the fleet, the breadth and the need for the fleet that we operate, it is an important and timely consideration. I think what I'm going to do now is ask the Community Services Director to talk with you a bit about the tables and chairs proposals. I agree, it is a multiple set of different location proposals, only one of which is for the deteriorating tables and chairs that you are using here tonight and that your colleagues on the Planning Commission and other city meetings use. That equipment experiences a fair amount of wear and tear with being set up and taken down and stored and whatever. But the director will address that and allow you to consider if that's something, a piece of that is something that you're interested in. So I would ask you to, why don't you come to the microphone?
Good evening again. So the tables and chairs, we actually have 3 different locations that we're recommending. The first would be the City Council chambers, and it's not only the tables and chairs that you're using, but it's the 14 chairs that are used by staff at the tables behind, as well as the 5 positions here along the staff table. Those chairs that are in fair repair would be deployed elsewhere. There are a number of staff chairs throughout the city that are of a lesser condition than these, so those that we could save, we would certainly redeploy. The second area that we're talking about replacing chairs would be Conference Room 15 at City Hall. Those are definitely experiencing some significant wear and tear, and in fact, the other day there's a metal rod that supports the back of one of the chairs, and that fell apart and came out. That's the second chair in room 115 that has failed. And so I think that is an indication that as the next several months go on, we're probably going to experience some significant failures in the others, as well as their just general less than presentable condition. The conference room, though, that is in the greatest need is Conference Room 101. We hold our development meetings in there. We bring the business community and the development community in. That conference table, you might recall the the trim that goes around the particle board of the table. We've tried to glue that and re-glue that on several occasions. I and others have cut clothes on there. Those chairs are very old, and we'd like that room, given the nature of the outside meetings that occur there, much like here, to present the city well. And so that is what the $37,000 that's in the supplemental one-time budget is for, is those 3 locations.
And Carrie, if I might interject, just so people know, a lot of the equipment that she's talking about was purchased secondhand at the height of the recession, when a lot of businesses in downtown San Francisco were just closing shop. So we were able to get a lot of that at the time. That was purchased secondhand, so it wasn't, that we used it all brand new or anything. We made some pretty good deals at the time, and they're getting near their life. So,
Through the chair.
Irene?
Thank you for the explanation, and I'd like to suggest that we change the title then, because it really sounds like it's just for us. So it may be just replacement of tables and chairs in conference rooms or something.
City
Facilities, yes.
In fact, if I may clarify, it's only 5 for you, and 2 more for the Planning Commission, but that's it for up there along with the 7 tables.
Okay, thank you.
If it pleases the council, I'd be happy to talk about the custodial position next. The current staffing that we have to service, so we have 10 buildings in the city that are serviced on a regular basis, daily or on multiple times daily. City Hall, Recreation Center, Library, Police Department, Cable Television, Parks Corporation Yard, Public Services Corporation Yard, Senior Center, Portola Performing Arts Center, and the Bel Air Clubhouse. And all of those, with the exception to the Portola Performing Arts Center and Bel Air, are serviced at least once daily. In a couple of instances, they are serviced twice daily, depending on public use of the facilities. So those 10 facilities, Monday through Friday, and in some cases beyond, are serviced by 4 full-time staff and 1 part-time 4-hour per day staff member. Now, if I may also mention that those staff members are responsible for setting up the council meetings, planning commission meetings. They're responsible for setting up all board, commission, and committee meetings in room 115. And so I know that we typically think about, well, you empty some trash cans and you vacuum and you dust a little bit, and that's kind of, and clean some bathrooms. But the list keeps going on and on if I articulate it. So what we are requesting is to essentially eliminate the half-time position and convert that, after recruitment and the establishment of an eligibility list, to a full-time position. That additional part-time capacity, so in other words, that additional half of a person, would allow us to provide greater service here at the senior center, that's what's identified, and to do vacation backfill. I'll give you an example. We have a custodian out on vacation this week, and we had a custodian call in sick yesterday. He's also out today, nothing serious. But when we have situations like that, our bench is so shallow that we then have to make very difficult choices about what facilities do and don't get serviced. And I will tell you, the front-end facilities that get serviced are the ones that the public uses. I think everyone would agree those are probably the ones that have the highest priority. So it's a small increase to the bench, but it provides what we believe to be a significant improvement to how we can deploy the custodial staff, and most importantly, how we can use what is probably first or second next to the recreation center, the most heavily used facility in the city, which is the senior center.
Any questions for Carrie on custodian? All right.
And if it pleases the council, I'll talk about the parks maintenance positions. So there are actually 2 parks maintenance positions that we're requesting. One is a lead parks maintenance worker, and the other is a parks maintenance worker 1-2. They start as a 1, and then after they've demonstrated an aptitude, they're promoted within a flexibly staffed classification to a parks maintenance 2. Those 2 positions would be the 2 positions that we would need to round out a 3rd crew. In addition to that, and that 3rd crew would be devoted to medians, which I'm embarrassed to say, if the council has seen them recently, are always in need of care and attention. Medians, we would also use that staff capacity for the new parks. And I know that you see the parks requests in the budget, and the council member is correct, those parks won't come online until the end of the year. It does take us some time to do the recruitments. We do have an eligibility list for one position. We do not have an eligibility list for the lead, and so that will take a matter of months. And the council, of course, may also be aware that when parks come online, they do so during a warranty period. And I think you probably also know, despite our best efforts to get the contractor to maintain those parks at a certain level, we have to service them daily. We have to service even those spaces that are under warranty, because the warranty is just about issues with the irrigation system or the plant material. We still have to make sure that the trash is picked up and any other issues that might exist in the park are addressed on a daily basis. So we're trying to get a little bit ahead of the curve. So the medians would be an area of focus. The two new parks, I'd like to also add that during fiscal 17-18, it's my understanding, based on the permitting process with Caltrans and the review of the plans, construction of the last median segment will also be completed between I-280 down San Bruno Avenue. One of the, two of the other things that I'd like just to mention to the council, we are experiencing something that we've not seen quite like we have in the last couple of years, and that's plant material growing throughout the year. We did have a dormant or a colder winter season that would start the end of October or November and would run through February, where daily attention to the parks could be deferred. As the weather has increased, so too has the plant material growth. And so we do need to provide more attention to the parks. The other thing that we're really looking forward to being able to do with these two additional positions is more preventative maintenance in the park, dealing with irrigation systems before they break in wastewater, painting restrooms before they start chipping paint, and the like. So that's the general overview of what those two parks maintenance positions would offer.
Any questions for Carrie?
Through the chair. So, in essence, back to the custodian, it's a 0.5%, 0.5 increase as far as from 4.5 current, asking for 5.
Correct.
Okay. I think also sometimes, and I didn't think to go back in the history of staffing component, but, if I went back in time, what did we have then? Or how did we do it? And I'm just trying to think back when some of us who used to work at the rec center, how many did we actually have on staff at Parks and Rec? I think that's always interesting to go back and then see if we had 4.5 10 years ago or 7 years ago, why did it work? Or if we had 6, then maybe we can, it's a very more of a quick answer, I would think. The other thing is, so what I've heard from you on the parks maintenance is, yes, I understand it takes time for the recruitment process and to get folks up to speed, that they're going to focus on medians, and then they would be focusing on the two new parks. Did I understand that correct, or that's their 3 tasks?
So I'd like to clarify that those positions would not be tasked specifically with those assignments. The addition of those 2 positions will give us capacity to rearrange responsibilities among all of the 9 parks maintenance worker positions that we currently have, and create 3 discrete teams that we don't currently have. So I don't want to give the council the misimpression that those 2 new positions will specifically work on those areas. Those will be the areas we will be able to address with those 2 additional positions.
Okay.
Marty, anything?
It goes back to when we have the brand new parks online, then we will need the additional workers, and until then, we don't need 2, maybe we need 1, but I understand that they could do more when you're increasing your workforce by 20%, right, from 9 to 11 workers, right? But I'm just, we can't just continue adding staff. They have pensions that we need to be concerned with, and I'll leave it at that.
Just so I understand, these won't be added tomorrow. It's going to take a while to actually get them on board.
That's correct.
Right. Which means when those parks come online, we want people ready then. Right. Okay. Anyone? Anyone for Gary? I think we're good.
So, ask the Community Development Director to very briefly address the one-time supplemental items related to planning, building, and front counter staff. I'll just mention before I let him talk that these are positions that were identified as one-time in last year's budget and that are currently in place and that are necessary for an efficient and ongoing seamless delivery of service, and are budgeted and suggested on a one-time basis in order to allow us the flexibility of staffing up when we now, and as we previously have had, an increasing volume of activity, but then to seamlessly be able to ramp back down if and when that level of activity subsides.
Okay. David?
Mr. Mayor and council members, as the city manager indicated, these are not permanent positions. These are proposed to be contract positions, and they are reoccurring. The idea here is that as we have increased activity, as we do right now, we're ramping up to address the needs of our customers. To give you an idea of activity quickly, we've got a number of private development projects. We have a mixed-use project at 111 San Bruno Avenue that we're processing right now. It's 60 residential units above about 8,600 square feet of commercial space. We have a residential project, about 24 units, replacing the former Lee's Buffet at 271 El Camino Real. We're looking at a redevelopment plan for the overall Mills Park Center, about 4.5 acres with perhaps 330 residential units and maybe 21,000 square feet of commercial space. We're also looking at preparing a specific plan for the Bay Hill area, about 89 acres in area, 400,000 square feet of new building space for YouTube. The Budget Motel site that has been long vacant is scheduled for demolition. We'll be working with the owners to come up with a plan for reuse of that property. We're looking at a master plan for considering how the shops at Tanforan could be repurposed and reused over the next 20 years. We also have public projects. We're updating our zoning code. We're preparing a climate action plan. And this past fiscal year, we've had 2,000 reports of zoning violations that we're following up on. So with that level of activity, what we're looking at is a planner. This is a continuing contract position. So as activity decreases, this position could be dropped. That would be a full-time position. We're also looking at a counter technician to serve at the counter to provide information to customers at the counter and also provide direct support to our code enforcement officers so that they can spend more time in the field. I would assume that this counter technician would not only be at the counter but be preparing administrative support work for our code enforcement officers. We also, the third position, have a plans examiner for only 8 hours a week, and the idea of this plans examiner is to provide support in-house in our department so that if we have a smaller plan review that could be done perhaps even over the counter, and that person would also be involved with some of the larger plan checks off-site, but would be available on-site if there are questions by applicants so that there could be a meeting on-site 8 hours a week. So that's the extent of what we're requesting. And given the level of activity that we imagine, this certainly seems to be warranted. And like I said, we could make adjustments as the activity goes down. And moreover, we do enter into reimbursement agreements with developers of private development projects. So in terms of cost recovery, as was asked by council, we do have reimbursement agreements, and we are directly compensated for time spent on private development projects. And in addition, with this development activity, we would fully expect increased fees in addition to cover these costs. Be happy to respond to any of your questions. Thank you.
Ken?
My one question, you sure you're asking for enough?
Well, I will point out that.
I mean, that's, if one person's gonna do that, then that's a super person, you better hire them.
Right.
But, I mean, you had a long list of
Yeah.
things that you wanna get accomplished this year, and, I'm assuming contract planning services, $120,000 is, 1 year for one full-time person, so, good luck to that person. What I've stated again before is that it's great that we're getting action, that there's a lot of interest in the city of San Bruno with large projects and even the smaller projects that do take time. 60 units is still a significant project, but it is still a bedroom community. And as much as we're tasked with dealing with code enforcement issues and everything, there are people that are taking pride in their homes and improving their homes and want to stay here in San Bruno. And so they'd like, the type of service that that we've always provided as far as planning services, at the planning commission, and then building department services. So I'm hoping with these enhancements that those ongoing services for our own residents, don't get affected.
As I indicated during our budget study session, we will monitor the need to deliver services to our residents and people working in our community. We do have the reimbursement agreements for private development projects, as I mentioned in our study sessions, and as there's a need to add staff to help process these applications in a timely manner, we would look to the reimbursement agreements that we would enter into with the private developers to supplement as needed.
Anything else? Marty?
For reimbursement, is it like 50% reimbursed? Is that what we've seen in the past? And then that would reduce the net impact to the fund if it's getting reimbursed, right? Through this table right here. If let's say you reimburse 25%, then that 25% would be reduced on the impact to the fund.
The way this works in terms of reimbursement, we have our staff, our contract staff and permanent staff on private development projects track the time that they're spending on those projects. And the time that they spend on those projects is then costed out at their full rate and charged against those projects. And then the developer needs to then pay the city back full billable rates, both our permanent staff and contract staff.
Our experience is what percentage is that? Is it, we've had a contract planner here before, and is it at least 50, 60, 70%? And then my follow-up question to that is that reimbursable amount reduces the impact to the overall fund, and it's not shown as a new revenue, like where on the other items where you it shows some kind of recovery on that.
Right. The way that works is that if the person is working on a public project, for example, so if the person is working on the zoning code update, and I'm talking about a staff person at this point, or even a contract person that's working at the counter, for example, and not doing directly reimbursable work, we would not get reimbursement, say, for a contractor. Say in the case of this particular planning position that I've listed here, I would estimate that that person would spend a fair amount of time, a large amount of that individual's time, really working at a lower level. And what I mean by that is a very important level, working with our citizens at the counter, providing information to citizens about zoning, general plans, et cetera, processing building permit applications so that our permanent staff, our long-time permanent staff, can be working on larger projects to free them up. So it could be, for example, that the individual that is assigned to this work is maybe spending 50% of his or her time on reimbursable work from a private development project, and say 50% of that person's time at the counter and doing other public work that wouldn't be directly reimbursed by a private development project. Does that help?
No, that's exactly what I was looking for. But as I'm looking at page 43, we have the totals in the spreadsheet. So if we're anticipating a 50% reimbursement, then the impact to the fund is half of that for budgeting purpose. I know it's budgeted, but that's budgets move, and you answered my question. I'm just wondering if maybe the finance director would we need to edit this spreadsheet for the impact of the fund?
So I was just consulting with the finance director about this, and it's my understanding that developer deposit account amounts, as the director was indicating, that are directly charged against both by full-time regular staff as well as by contract staff. Those amounts are typically not shown as offsets in the budget because we don't, they're not predictable. And so those direct charges are directly covered through the deposit accounts, but and would offset, but are not estimated at this time.
Okay. Anything else for David? Just David, when Ken said, I think really seriously is we have a lot of stuff coming up, and I think you should monitor it very, very closely. If you need more help, I think there's going to be ways to get it, because in the long run, 4 or 5 years down the road, this is all going to pay for itself with all of these projects and developments. It's very, very important that we be efficient in how we attack all of this stuff coming our way.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So I think I'm going to go to the Public Information Communications Officer and then ask Chief Barberini to step up in just a moment and talk about the Community Service Officer, and that completes the list that I kept of the City Council's comments. Related to the Public Information Communications Officer, this item is proposed as a staff position in the City Manager's Office for the purpose of assuring a truly robust public outreach to residents and the public generally across all departments, all operations, and all types of media, and in particular focused on who needs to know what, how do they need to receive that information, and what is the best way to connect with persons in all segments of our community and the public generally, as I indicated. Currently, public information, outreach, and education is done by each department. It's done with relatively, I would say, limited coordination among departments. And in many cases, it's done on project-specific topics or with I'm going to say with a relatively narrow, we've got to get this message out because we have a meeting coming up or because we have a project or something. So it's a relatively narrow view and kind of real-time focused without, generally speaking, a broad-based citywide view focus and an opportunity to better inform the public, but also to better tell the city's story, and it's a good one. So as a result, while information is generally available and certainly all required outreach and information is definitely made within the appropriate time frames and in the appropriate manner, all departments work hard to assure that that is the case, and that what is necessary and most important is disseminated. I would still say that information and outreach does not do as good of a job as I believe you and our public expect to tell the city's story and to meet the very specific needs of our public. Staff believes that it's both necessary and desirable for the city to be able to do more, as I've indicated. And in particular, what we're finding is that the increasing and broad-based use of social media is one of the most important ways that people receive and expect to receive information from municipalities and from all sorts of other content providers. Social media is now used by the city, but only on a truly regular basis by two departments. Those are our police department and our community services department. And as I indicated previously, with a relatively narrow focus associated with programs and activities under those particular umbrellas. We currently do not have staff capacity or the ability on a regular and reliable basis to create, coordinate, develop, post, and monitor social media content about the broad variety of city programs, activities, events, and initiatives. Again, that's done on a limited basis, and our outreach is done with a relatively narrow breadth of content. And I would just note in closing that other much smaller cities than ours have recognized the value of creating and disseminating the public messages in real time, and the public's use of social media to inform themselves about the city and about issues and activities of interest requires that the city be much more aggressive, much more active, and be driving the conversation as opposed to simply reacting and responding on a time available basis, which is essentially what we're doing now. So that's my response to the several comments that we heard from the City Council about questioning the value or the need or the timeliness of that particular initiative. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Connie at this time? Does that complete your list?
One more, I'd like Chief Barberini to just give a couple of comments about the community service officer positions.
Good evening again. I just want to clarify what exactly is being sought when we're talking about community service officers, and differentiate between what the requests with these supplementals presented before you tonight and how they differentiate from the requests in the larger scale or major supplementals. As you may recall, the major supplementals included 2 additional CSOs, is how we refer to community service officers that would be in the field, and to increase our capacity to be out there and proactively address issues such as parking in neighborhoods. While we're still excited and looking forward to having that the ability to do that, these supplementals are a little bit different. There is one position that is currently assigned or currently funded now via the Glenview or Crestmore Fund. And while that CSO's primary responsibility is to that neighborhood and the needs in that neighborhood, we have also been experiencing some benefit when that individual is not needed up there. His work up there has been well received. It's been very valuable, and we continue to receive positive feedback about the impact that position has been in the neighborhood. However, when it's not needed up there, we've relied on that position to address issues such as parking, abandoned vehicles, and other neighborhood type complaints. So that's the one position that we'd simply like to it would be retaining that position when that funding concludes at the end of the calendar year or mid-fiscal year. The other 2 positions, at the risk of repeating myself from the second study session, is the first is a CSO that would be assigned to our property room. We have one CSO assigned there now. The council was kind enough to allot us a part-time position this fiscal year that works 16 hours a week. It really kind of illustrated to us how large of a scale we're dealing with when we're talking about our property room. We're talking about tens of thousands of pieces of evidence that we're having a hard time managing, and basically we're a little bit underwater in that area. Our calls for service and our activity has increased by about 25% over the last few years, and we're experiencing that from a support standpoint. Not everything the police department does is out in the field. There's some heavy lifting, both literally and figuratively, that goes on within the 4 walls of the police department, and this is one area where we're struggling a little bit. And having that part-time person, and while she's been great, she's been extremely valuable, it showed us that, even with that additional help, we continue to fall farther and farther behind. And then finally, I mentioned the digital evidence officer, which it's the future. The way we manage evidence now is changing, and the way we're required to submit evidence, both the DA's office and requests from other entities, is changing. And frankly, we're going to need one individual with the expertise to be able to do that. That's going to, the need for that is going to be magnified. The next several weeks, you'll be receiving a proposal to implement a body-worn in-car camera system, which is becoming the industry standard and a best practice. And in order to successfully do that, we're going to need somebody to support that program. I think we've seen in the past, especially with the implementation of in-car cameras, that if we don't have the support and we don't have that resource behind it, that it'll fail. And we experience that, and we don't want to experience that again. So I just wanted to clarify what exactly these community service officers would be doing and kind of differentiate between what the requests were, so there was no confusion. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good. Any questions for the chief? Ken?
So, 2 now, 2 later?
Well, so no, so the digital evidence officer we'd be seeking a CSO position for that, which would be a third, frankly, in the enhancements that you're looking at tonight. And then the major enhancements where we provided a joint program with public services and community development would be an additional 2 should the council choose to entertain that.
Okay, so 3 now.
I'm sorry, it would be 3 now and 2
3
later.
now and then
Yes.
2 later.
Yeah. Actually, for this year, it would be 2.5. We have the funding for that one position through the next half of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's
Yeah.
the difference in the salaries? Because one's at 87,000, one's at 53,000.
Yeah, the 53.
And then one's at 110.
So the way that we're forecasting this is the $53,000 position is the position that is currently funded through that external source. So we're looking at half the year, which for this fiscal year is how that's reflected there. For the property officer position is the 87,000, which would be a lower step or bottom step position. And the reason we went up to a higher step with the digital evidence officers, because we don't know how we're going to recruit for that. We want to keep it as a CSO classification. We think that's the most cost-effective approach to that. We just don't know, as far as qualified applicants, what we're going to have to do to attract those types of folks. It may have to be at a higher step, and we just wanted to, it may not be, but we just wanted to have that there in full disclosure, kind of what it may cost us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else for the chief? Okay. Do all of those comments and answer everybody's questions to satisfaction? Marty?
I'm still, I think having the communication officer full-time and not knowing surely what everything they're doing, I think perhaps some contract work there to kind of see how it works out, to understand how.
That's the public information officer?
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
Yes, public information communication officer. To see how that actually works out, or maybe staff can bring back more definition of duties and by creating this new position. I do agree that having an interaction with the public is important, but I still think that I'm not convinced that we need a full-time person to do that. We have the police doing their part, we have parks doing their part, and I think they're doing a good job at that. So I'm not convinced on that one.
Okay. Rico?
So I do believe that the communication is key in anything we do in life, relationships, community, etc., at work. So I do believe we need to look at it. I don't know that I'm convinced at this moment to actually authorize this enhancement, but I did like Councilmember O'Connell's comment about maybe having this come back and vet it with more detail and a better discussion on it. I think what some of the comments that the city manager made helped to quantify that a lot for me, but I liked the council member's suggestion.
Okay. Irene? On all of the items.
What was my question? What was my suggestion? I appreciate actually what you said, and I agree that we do need a public information communications officer. I would like to go ahead and approve the budget for it, but going forward, see how that actually, kind of fill in what that person would be doing and how much we could get for that. But I'd like to have the money set aside to do that. We can always not do it later, but I'd like to keep that. I'd like to address the custodian. I think it's necessary. One of the things we keep forgetting to factor in is as the buildings age, which they all are, it takes longer and more effort to keep them up and keep them clean. And the population has grown so much that the use is harder and harder on them. So as you all know from your own homes, as those things happen, it takes more effort to keep them up. So I support doing the custodian. And while I realize that the new parks are not online yet, they will be hopefully shortly, and it does take time to hire people and get them going. I see a need for increased park maintenance right now. I know some of the people who are in this audience have actually gone out and helped clean up the parks, and I know Operation Clean Sweep people, we've gone out and cleaned up the parks. So I don't see any problem with keeping additional people busy until the other two parks are online. So I don't see any problems with any of these, except I'd like the tables and chairs for the city council meetings title changed, and I would like to have the public information communication officer. I'd like more discussion about that actual role, but I'd like to keep the money promised for that or put aside for that.
I'm okay with with the community, the public information officer expenditure, but agree that let's get more information and get a real clear outlook as to what the duties are going to be and how it's going to start up. Everything else I'm fine with.
I'm fine with pretty much everything. With the public information officer, I know Marty mentioned, maybe a contract type of person. I really think if you're going to have someone that's going to, in some way, represent the city on social media, you really have to have somebody involved in a day-to-day basis. So I'm pushing for a full-time position, and the sooner we can get that person on board, the sooner we can get this rolling. I think it's very important. So if there's
I'm hearing from, I think, all five of us in one way or the other that we all think it's important and we all think it's necessary. And I think Councilmember O'Connell has suggested that the monies be a somewhat position and the monies be allocated in the 17-18 budget so it's available and it's there. However, with that, then it comes back to council with a better explanation, a detailed description of what it does, how it'll service, and what difference it'll make for the community. Is that fair, Irene?
Yes.
Right.
Which it would normally anyway.
Right.
So, if based on that concept, then I'm willing to go ahead and support that, knowing that will come back. And again, if we say part-time, if we say contract, if we say full-time, the monies are there, or they can be lessened, or they can be removed.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Marty?
I would like to suggest a compromise on the parks workers, that if we're going to go out and hire their maintenance park workers, correct? And that if we go ahead and hire them now, and the parks aren't ready, they can go out, help clean up our downtown because it needs more help. The mayor hit it right on the spot. We got how many pages spread in the Chronicle about how our downtown restaurants are doing, and that's going to get people to come downtown. There'll be people coming this weekend to kind of go, oh wow, let's go and check out this place. There's a kava bar downtown, right? So I think we should be very proactive now to show the shining face of our downtown and spend the resources there and continue forward with that, so that it looks nicer when people show up. So I'll go ahead and support hiring the parks maintenance workers, but while we're waiting for the parks to be built, that they be allocated to help the downtown.
Through the chair.
Rico.
And correct me, but I think, and I think Councilmember O'Connell concurred, that up until those parks are ready, as you mentioned with the beautification task force and people trying to clean San Mateo Avenue, that those resources could be deployed. But what I'd also would say, I'm going to have faith in staff because actions speak louder than words, and we're going to see if it's cleaner. But I don't know that it's our place. I'm going to speak for myself. I don't believe it's my place to have tell the city manager and the director where to allocate staff specifically. I think they operate the city, they deal with day to day, but obviously until those parks are online, there are resources that are available and they should be put to the use to make the most difference to this community. And San Mateo Avenue is not a bad place to start.
Okay.
Through the chair one last time, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me to speak a little more. I know. I hear you, Rico. But right now, I believe we don't have anybody going down on the weekends to clean up the downtown, and we could definitely use it on the weekends. So hiring these people and knowing the environment that we're dealing with right now and the publicity we're getting, I think we should be very aware of that and make sure we make a bigger effort now rather than waiting. So there you go.
Okay. So we've had a lot of discussion tonight. Would someone like to introduce a resolution?
I'll introduce the resolution to approve the proposed supplemental enhancements and the operating budgets and the everything, the capital improvement budgets.
Okay.
So that is, let me make sure I have it. Yeah, that's it.
One and two.
Councilmember O'Connell?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Rico Medina?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra?
Aye.
Mayor Ruane?
Aye. Then we have a short discussion about the GAN.
Oh, I was just,
I was going to introduce.
I was going to introduce.
I was just going to mention very, very briefly that the GAN limit, as the council well knows, is a result of voter propositions from the late 70s and the early 80s that sets an expenditure appropriation limit. That limit in 2016-17 was $39 million. By two factors, a cost of living factor and a population adjustment. The updated limit for 17-18 is $41,039,622, an increase of about $2 million. The appropriation calculation that is subject to this limit is $28 million, meaning that the city is in fact $12,600,000 under the limit, which essentially means that the city could spend $12 million more
If we had it.
If we had it. With that, I'd answer any questions the council has.
If there are no questions from council, I'll go ahead and introduce the resolution for the GAN limit for 217-218.
Councilmember Rico Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra?
Aye.
Mayor Ruane?
Aye. I just want to thank staff. We have reams of paper here, and there's lots of numbers on the paper, but they just didn't get put there. It was a lot of research by staff and a lot of really hard work to make this happen. So congratulations to staff for putting this budget together, and all the department heads and everybody in the city that worked hard on it. I know finance really spent a lot of time, and we lost a person kind of in the middle of all of this stuff, and Mr. O'Leary stepped in to help and pick it up with Darlene and the whole gang. And I just want to congratulate staff for all of your hard work. It's a big deal for a city to approve a budget like this, and congratulations. So we're going to take a 2-minute break. like to call the meeting back to order. Next item is item number 9, which is public comment. Items not on this agenda. It is the council's policy to raise matters in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Would anyone like to address the council under public comment?
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I'm Steve Seymour from Mastic Avenue. I would like for you to consider, there's an ordinance that's been on the books here since 1984, and it's your oversized vehicle ordinance, which is ordinance 7-24050 and 7-24010. And what this ordinance does is it helps you to kind of hold accountable the oversized vehicles, which is any vehicle greater than 21 feet in length and 6 feet and 6.5 feet wide, 6,000 pounds. These vehicles transition through the avenues particularly, but all through the city. And they're not supposed to be on our public streets unless they're making deliveries, and they're not supposed to park. But what this ordinance does, and I spoke to a few of the police officers, and they would also like to see maybe this updated, because currently they're only allowed to warn these vehicles when they're parked on these streets. So they place this warning, and this warning allows that truck to stay there for 12 hours before they can cite it. And then all the truck has to do is move for 120 hours. So what's happening now is you have trucks, really large trucks, and they damage our streets. And then we as taxpayers, you talked about the budget tonight, we have to find money to repair these things. These trucks shouldn't be in these neighborhoods to begin with. But what they're doing is they just move a street. So you have one truck, it gets a warning, parks at 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, moves the next morning, doesn't come back to the same street. It goes one street over, and then another street over, and then another street over, and then it returns. And all the police can do is warn them every time. They can't cite them. They can't do anything more than that. So I'd like for you to consider taking the steps to update this. South San Francisco, our neighboring cities, allow for a citation to be placed the first time the truck parks, but we don't. I think it would be beneficial if we changed it.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else under public comment?
Tim O'Brien, Florida Avenue. Good evening. I'd like to talk about safety issues throughout the city, especially on where I live on the east side. As far as the crosswalks and where vehicles are supposed to stop, they don't see the stop sign. I just see people rolling through, especially like on Taylor Avenue and Chapman or Carlton and Texas Avenue. They just don't pay attention to the stop signs. They just roll through it, and it's a real hazard for the people that are, the neighbors, the residents, the four-legged kids crossing the streets. So I like to see the city come out and take a look at that and paint the stop signs on the street and the crosswalks to clearly define where the vehicles are supposed to stop, so everybody will be safe and nobody will get hurt, and let's be a safer neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Good evening, King. Raina, Florida Avenue. I echo what my husband has addressed. I also would like to publicly announce that my husband and I would like to adopt our Commodore dog park. And it seemed like a lot of folks in the community has also come forward that they want to help. Okay, I also would like the city to also help in keeping the park, the dog park clean. And hopefully we get the opportunity to adopt the park. We would like to basically enhance it and see what we want to work with the city and see if we can get some budget to improve it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sandra Perez Vargas Mastic, and I want to say that we have a new application now. At our insistence, late last year at one of our sessions, we've been asking for a real-time app so we can report situations in the neighborhood. That came about because a group of people came here in front of you and pretty much demanded a change. Before that, it was like pulling teeth for the last 20 years to really get anything accomplished. Perfect example is the Salvation Army. For over 20 years, it was a major dumping ground. It wasn't until a group of us showed up here together in a force, in numbers, and asked that the city actually help us. We're cleaning the streets, we're cleaning Commodore Park still, we're doing things like that. So I want to encourage anybody who's sitting at home to come and join us here, because when we do show up in numbers, changes are happening. We did ask for a truck to come and pick up mattresses and sofas and miscellaneous garbage all over town. And that was allowed to happen for so long until a group of us came here and said it's no longer acceptable. So hopefully this marks a change, and another change that could be marked with elections coming up. Everybody register to vote. If you don't like how San Bruno's been run for the last 20 years, make your voices heard. We're the residents, right? And as far as the newspaper announcement you said with the restaurants, I think it's fantastic to get any attention to the restaurants, because a lot of locals won't go to San Mateo Avenue because it's filthy. We still have the same newspaper stands that we've been talking about for months and months. Have they been ordered? I have no idea. We've been told garbage cans have been ordered with recycling bins. Have they? I have no idea. So we have a long, long way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else under public comment? Okay, go right on to the conduct of business. Our first item is item 10A, adopt a resolution approving the San Bruno Community Foundation 2017-18 budget and appointing 4 directors for 4-year terms.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. We have 2 items in one for your convenience this evening. The first item is approval by the City Council of the Foundation's budget, which is required by the bylaws that the City Council adopted and also approved by the Foundation. And then the second item is to appoint 4 directors for 4-year terms at this time. So I'm going to speak briefly about both of those items, and then the Executive Director of the Foundation, Leslie Hadamia, is going to make some additional comments, hopefully almost as brief as mine. So the first item is the budget item. I think she might object to that. The first item is the budget item, and as you know, the Foundation's budget is subject to City Council approval. The budget was developed by the Foundation and its advisors. Its several advisors did a lot of work on that budget, and it's extremely impressive if you go to their meetings and watch the process for developing their budget, much like yours, is extensive, involves a lot of deliberation and a lot of expert assistance to develop. The main difference between this year's budget and last year's budget is you'll see an allocation of about $50 million set aside for the future construction of the city's pool and recreation center project. So Leslie will make some additional comments about that for you. The second item before you this evening is the consideration of appointment of 4 directors. So the appointment of directors to the Foundation Board by the bylaws is within the purview of the City Council to appoint. There are 4 directors up who have 4-year terms. They'll be up by the end of the year. Those would be Nancy Krause, John McLaughlin, Emily Roberts, and Tim Ross. And you might remember that you had appointed Mr. Ross to fill the position vacated by Ben Cohn when he moved out of town. As the staff report indicates, all of those individuals, all 4 of them, have indicated an interest to continue with the board, and that would allow the development and implementation of the foundation's plans and programs without any interruption or uncertainty. It also would allow the foundation to select its officers, as they traditionally have done in the late fall, so that it can be approved by the City Council before the end of the calendar year, because those officers then take office in January of 2017, 18. So with that, I'll turn it over to Leslie for her comments, and then back to the City Council.
Thank you, and thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight on behalf of the Foundation. As you know, I'm Leslie Hadamia, the Executive Director of the Foundation, and I am joined here tonight by several members of our board, President Nancy Krause, Secretary John McLaughlin, Treasurer Tim Ross, and Board Member Emily Roberts. Before I get to the two action items, I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you some of the highlights of the past year that the Foundation has experienced. We have really gotten past sort of our corporate governance policy building phase and have really plowed into full steam ahead into our programmatic phase. And over the past year, we have been busy launching and administering a broad array of programs that utilize the restitution funds for the benefit of the entire San Bruno community. Let me just touch on a couple of the highlights, all of which have emerged from the results of our community listening campaign that we conducted in the spring of 2015. First, as you know, last year we launched the Crestmore Neighborhood Memorial Scholarship. In this first year, we awarded $100,000 multi-year scholarships to 7 community service-minded San Bruno students going into college. Earlier this month, we awarded our second set of Crestmore scholarships, totaling $120,000 to 9 impressive young high school and community college graduates. A number of council members were in attendance at our awards presentation earlier this month. And as you know, this program was specifically created to honor the community members who most directly endured the destruction of the 2010 gas pipeline explosion, especially the 8 individuals who lost their lives. And I think if you've read the bios of the scholarship recipients, you'll see that they are inspiring and give us great hope for the future of our community. Second, last summer we created the Community Grants Fund and awarded at the end of 2016 $200,000 in grants of up to $25,000 each to local organizations who form the lifeblood of the San Bruno community. The grants went to a diverse set of community groups, from St. Vincent de Paul to the Prospects Girls Basketball Program to Relay for Life to Project Read, and so on. We will launch our second community grants cycle next week with an application deadline of September 27th, and we plan to award another $200,000 in grants at the end of this year. Third, as you know, the Foundation Board has expressed support for the city's plan to build a new recreation center and all-season pool facility in San Bruno City Park, and we are working with city staff on a $50 million grant arrangement to fund the design and construction. We are very much looking forward to partnering with the city on this valuable and much-needed resource for our community. Fourth, as the precursor to the council's decision to move forward on the rec center pool project, the Foundation funded the city's community facilities vision plan with 2 grants totaling more than $206,000. We were pleased with the high level of community engagement involved in the vision planning and prioritization process, and with the seriousness with which the council received the results. Fifth, the Foundation has committed $200,000 to support the city's development of the new neighborhood park on Florida Avenue, and we look forward to that park's completion later this year, bringing a new outdoor play and gathering space to the east side of town. Sixth, for the past 2 years, the Foundation has been a proud sponsor of the city's Community Day in the Park with $30,000 grants each year. This year, we also assisted the city in bringing in 3 additional sponsors, Walmart, YouTube, and Skyline College, who collectively contributed $20,000 to the event, which, as you know, was enjoyed by many community members just 3 weeks ago. 7th, at our last board meeting, the board approved an increase in our level of support for pedestrian safety improvements in San Bruno from $170,000 to nearly $264,000. We are excited to work with the city to bring flashing beacons to unsignalized crosswalks near 2 schools in the San Bruno Park School District and several more in the downtown area. We are also working to gain the support of additional community partners to join in this pedestrian safety initiative. And finally, one of the most exciting strategic initiatives this year aims to make music education a hallmark of San Bruno's public schools. We are providing nearly $500,000 over 3 years to the San Bruno Education Foundation and the Cappuccino High School Alumni Association to benefit the music programs at all San Bruno Park School District schools and Cappuccino High School. This initiative is a collaboration of many groups supporting our public schools, and the community will benefit not only from stronger schools and stronger musicians, but a sense of community pride resulting from the beautiful music these groups will share with all of us. So, getting to the 2 action items. In accordance to our bylaws, before the council this evening is consideration of the Foundation's 2017-18 budget. Just a few words about the budget. The expenses include more than $50.6 million in direct programs expenses, $50 million for the Rec Center Pool project, and the balance for the scholarships, community grants, and several smaller strategic grants. And then about $379,000 in support costs, roughly the same as this past year's budget. Just so you know, we record grants as expenses when the grant agreement has been actually executed, which is why the $50 million pool recreation center project will show on this year's budget, even though the money will be spent over several years. On the income or funds available for operations side of the budget, it's much lower, as most of the $50 million, as you know, for the rec center pool will not be paid out until we hit the construction phase. We do not show investment income for our 2 investment accounts, the quasi-endowment and the strategic pool, on our budget and internal monthly financial statements, as those amounts are subject to great variance that is out of our control, and they do not reflect the amount of funds that are actually available for operations. The board designates the payout or the amount to transfer from both pools to cover the year's cash flow needs into our operating budget. Thus, what the budget shows are the funds actually available for operations. It shows that we are taking a 2.25% payout from the quasi-endowment, or roughly $353,000, to cover community grants and scholarships, with the balance needed to cover our cash needs for the year, a little over $1 million coming from our strategic pool. The other foundation-related item before the council tonight is reappointment of the 4 board members to 2 4-year terms. President Nancy Krause, Secretary John McLaughlin, Treasurer Tim Ross, and board member Emily Roberts. Their initial terms end this year, and all 4 have expressed a desire to continue their volunteer service to San Bruno and the foundation and serve second terms as permitted under the foundation's bylaws. All 4 have been instrumental in helping the foundation get to where it is today, the creation of all these programs and the careful stewardship of the restitution funds. We respectfully ask the City Council to approve the foundation's 2017-18 budget and to reappoint Nancy, John, Tim, and Emily to new 4-year terms on the foundation's board. Both actions will allow the foundation to continue moving forward on its current trajectory to use the restitution funds to enhance the quality of life for all of us in San Bruno. Before I close, I'd also like to acknowledge by name the other board members who have been key to the foundation's success: Vice President Frank Headley and board members Pat Bohm and Dr. Regina Standback-Stroud. Each of the 7 foundation board members have contributed significant time outside of the monthly meetings to enable the accomplishments I have detailed for you tonight. I also acknowledge the volunteer service of the Foundation's Investment Committee, who include, in addition to Treasurer Ross and Vice President Headley, community members Tony Clifford, Mark Hayes, and Georgianne Perkins. Thank you for your consideration of our agenda items, and I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Any questions for Leslie? Ken?
I think that the one curiosity I have is how much money is there of the $70 million? This is like a fund that just keeps giving. And I understand, the particulars and just expenses of what you're going to operate on the 50 million plus, but just for what's in round numbers, how much is in the fund?
Sure. So currently, the quasi-endowment is at $16.5 million, and that started at $15 million. And the strategic pool is about $55.1 million. That's as of May 31st, so our last statement. So the total of those together is about $71.6 million. And in the past fiscal year, we made an investment income on those two funds about $2.78 million. And our expenses for this past year were about $1.6 million. So our expenses were less than what we made in investment income if you just total them.
That's good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Leslie? Rico?
Any other questions? To the board and to Leslie, thank you for staying with us this evening. We appreciate your patience. If there are no other questions from my colleagues, I'll be more than happy to go ahead and introduce the resolution approving the San Bruno Community Foundation 2017-2018 budget and appointing the 4 directors for a 4-year term.
Councilmember Rico Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. And before we finish with this item, I just want to thank all of you for what you have done and what you are about to embark on, because it's a lot of work. But this was really a one-off when it all started a number of years ago, from negotiating all of that $70 million restitution, and you have really served the community well. So I really appreciate it, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Item 10B, adopt a resolution authorizing city manager to execute certificate of acceptance for property adjacent to the Acapella well site and execute license agreement with Monogram Residential Acapella LP for temporary construction access.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Councils. The item in front of you tonight is regards to the acceptance of property of vacant land adjacent to the existing Acapella well site to be used for a future well facility. Just kind of a brief background on the development of the project. The city had an existing well located at Commodore Park, which was a source of city water supply until it went out of service in 2010. And 6 potential well sites were evaluated, and 2 of these sites were determined to be suitable for the replacement well location. And one was at the parcel on the crossing at San Bruno Acapella site, and the other was near the existing well facility at Commodore Park. The city contracted with the firm Erler and Kalinowski, EKI, for engineering design services for the replacement well. The initial phase of work was to put together the bid documents, to perform the test well and determine the estimated production rate, and then the production well design and installation. The last phase of work will be to design the well facilities and include a new building. That includes a new building similar to the Well 20 at Lions Field and treatment facility. So EKI completed the bid documents for the test wells for these 2 locations, and it was advertised for construction. And the first test well was installed, to be installed, was at the Acapella well site. And since the aquifer at the site is deeper than the Commodore site, which would potentially provide a higher production rate. And here's a slide that shows the location of the proposed well site. You can see the Acapella property that's located there, and then next to that is National Archives. So this property is kind of nestled in between 380 and Acapella at the corner there. So the test well was completed at the Acapella site first, and then drilling logs and water sample results concluded that the location will be capable of producing about 400 gallons per minute of water, which is comparable to other wells in the city. And the water quality tests also showed that the treatment will be required at this well site for manganese. The city staff contracted firm EKI then began to develop the conceptual design and laying out the proposed building footprint and electrical components and determining the ingress and egress into the well facility. And during the design, it was determined that the required building footprint for the treatment facility needed to be larger to accommodate the filters, piping, and electrical equipment. And the ingress and egress to the well site was obstructed by an adjacent vacant parcel as well. So here's a close-up look of the well site. So the city was granted the shaded green area that you see there. And Marina Drive was a private road, and there's parking adjacent to it. So the city, we were pretty much landlocked for that little parcel. We weren't able to, get into that site at all. So, and hence the reason why we started coordinating to acquire or to request the additional parcel adjacent to it. So due to the site constraints, we contacted professional land services to assist in coordinating with the property owner to determine whether the adjacent vacant parcel can be granted to the city. And the owner of this a cappella site, has changed hands several times, and now we're dealing with Monogram Residential a cappella LP instead. So they were contacted, and Professional Land Services successfully negotiated ownership transfer for this parcel. It's about 2,050 square feet to the city for $0. So they have an executed grant deed to the city for recordation, and a license agreement needs to be executed as well for temporary construction access for this production well. So to accept the adjacent parcel, the city attorney and city manager must execute a certificate of acceptance and file it along with the executed grant deed at the San Mateo County Recorder's Office. So, and a resolution is necessary as well. And as far as fiscal impact, it's an established project in the CIP, and it's funded through the Water Enterprise Fund. So there's no additional fee for the acceptance of property here other than the recordation fees. That's all I have.
Good.
I'll be happy
Any
to answer
questions for Jimmy or action? Action by the council?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll introduce the resolution.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Rico Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item 10C, receive report and direct staff to cancel the August 8, 2017 regular city council meeting.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this item is proposed for your consideration consistent with prior year's practice. For a very long time, the city council has recognized that the summer months, and August in particular, are a time of vacations where we can organize our business around a pre-scheduled cancellation of a meeting. Where we previously canceled the second meeting in August, we more recently have acknowledged school schedules and the earlier start dates of our local education facilities, and some are essentially being wrapped up by about the third week of August. So at this point, staff is presenting you with an opportunity to consider cancellation of the first meeting in August. Business would resume on the fourth Tuesday of August as normal.
Need a motion or
Yes.
Nah. Yeah, I'll move that we accept staff's recommendation.
Second.
Motion second to cancel the August 8th meeting. And the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Reports of commissions, boards, and committees. There aren't any this evening. Comments from council members. I just want to wish everyone a very safe and sane and happy 4th of July coming up here. We had a closed session already, but I would like to close the meeting tonight in memory of a very dear friend of ours, of this city's, Ken Kreisel. Ken used to greet us out here for our meetings every night, and he passed away last Saturday. Very unfortunate. So Ken's easygoing nature and quick sense of humor welcomed both volunteers and visitors and gave the San Bruno Senior Center the warm, welcoming feeling we strive to cultivate each day. You would often hear him whistling down the hallway as he locked up for the day or singing a song in the weekly karaoke class. Ken volunteered at the San Bruno Senior Center for 10 years, banking over 125 hours each month. He was willing to help with anything and everything. Among his many contributions, he especially enjoyed sweeping, watering, rolling the bocce ball court surface daily during bocce league season. Acted as a captain for the senior softball league, including equipment inventory and team player selection, assisting with the oversight of the weekly horseshoe league and the end of the season tournament and barbecue, enforcing league rules to ensure fair play for bocce ball, horseshoes, and softball, helping set up weekly tables for ping pong, picking up daily donations from local businesses, and securing the San Bruno Senior Center at the end of each day.
serving lunches on busy days, especially at parties, and supporting the goals of the San Bruno ARP chapter, serving on the San Bruno Senior Citizen Advisory Board, and serving as a city employee as a facility attendant. He was responsible and a dedicated worker. We were all so lucky to have Kenny in our lives. He will be missed deeply by all who knew him and benefited from his timeless service to the San Bruno community. So please join me in a moment of silence in memory of Ken. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.